What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Fantasy Vault. Today, we're going to be talking about the 2026 wide receiver rankings. We've already done a video on the running back rankings for this year. If you want to check that out, go down to the description below and make sure you hit the link. So, wide receiver might be deeper than ever in 2026, but that doesn't mean that every early round option carries the same level of safety. So the top three are coming off historically productive seasons. Several established superstars are trying to bounce back from quarterback or injury problems. And some of the best values come from younger receivers stepping into much larger roles. I'm ranking my top 25 wide receivers, placing them into 5 tiers, and giving you the reason, the risk, and the draft case for every player. Okay, so these are the three wide receivers with the strongest cases to finish as the overall wide receiver one. They combine massive target shares, elite efficiency, and proven season winning ceilings already. We've seen massive seasons from every single one of them, if not multiple already. But coming in as a wide receiver one, and my 1-1 is Ja'Marr Chase. Ja'Marr Chase has been nothing short of the best wide receiver in fantasy in the past, I don't even know how many years, but a long time. It's been a few years, and he's at the peak, and he's got a quarterback behind him who is more than willing to throw the dice and throw it his way. So I think the big thing was this past year was that his touchdown total came down, but everything else kind of combats that, with his target share and all of that. I think it combats that. And T. Higgins there, I think helps him overall. It might hurt in the touchdown department, but I do think that it helps him overall in terms of the certain schemes that he's seeing and the routes and stuff that he's running and the ways that he's getting open. So Ja'Marr Chase is my wide receiver one because nobody combines target volume, explosive plays, red zone dominance, and proven ceiling like him. Last year, he still caught 125 passes for more than 1,400 yards during a season in which Joe Burrow missed more than significant time. If Burrow stays healthy and the touchdowns move back to what Chase saw back in 2024, he can create a meaningful advantage over the rest of the entire position. So my wide receiver two is Puka Nacua. All three of these are interchangeable, like I said. I can't fault you for however you want to go about it. But, it's proven. Last year, Puka and Matt Stafford combined for 129 receptions for 1,700 yards and 10 touchdowns with 166 targets. He finished as the fantasy wide receiver one and currently has 313 receptions for 4,200 yards and 19 touchdowns in only 44 career games. His role in Sean McVay's offense is as secure as almost any receiving role in football. Well, the problem is that Puka plays a very physical style of football, and he's already dealt with multiple injuries throughout his career. His long-term outlook is always connected to the availability and succession plan of Matt Stafford. And the problem with a lot of sometimes in the red zone is obviously having Devontae Adams now there the past 2 seasons. So that's been a hindrance in the red zone, but he's still a surefire, going to be compete for the wide receiver one. Can't fault you for putting him there. So my wide receiver three and ending off tier one for the wide receivers of 2026 is going to be JSN, Jaxon, Smith-Njigba. So this past year, JSN completely exploded and is now the reigning offensive player of the year. So last year, he amassed 119 receptions with 1,800 yards and 10 touchdowns on 163 targets. But the problem with all of those nice stats is that Seattle now has a new offensive coordinator in Brian Fleury. And almost any player coming off of 1,800 yards is definitely going to be a regression candidate. The Seahawks also invested into Rashee, signing him to multiple years, so potentially giving them another meaningful option in the passing game. I think with his elite target dominance compared with the downfield efficiency, you know, I think that his 2025 leap is something that's sustainable. You know, he went from an emerging slot receiver to one of the most dominant receivers in football. He led the NFL in yards, commanded roughly a third of Seattle's targets, was near the top of the league in virtually every advanced receiving metric. The only hesitation is that we are drafting him immediately after a historic breakout while Seattle is currently transitioning to a new coordinator. Tier 2. So, Tier 2 contains two of the safest first round receivers in fantasy football. Their floors are extremely high, but their loaded offenses and target competition make it slightly harder for them to separate and be that wide receiver one that we're looking for. So the first one on this tier is Amon-Ra St. Brown. He has been the most consistent wide receiver we've had the past few years, consistently being a top 5 wide receiver. And I think we kind of look at him as a boring option compared to the others that we have, like a Drake London or George Pickens or something like that. But he consistently finishes in the top 5 at the end of the year. And so I don't think his target share is going anywhere. And I think that if anything, with Sam Laporta coming back, yeah, that might eat into a little bit, but it's not enough. They're purposefully designing plays for Amon-Ra to get the ball and to get the ball in his hands, and he is in the game plan every single week, and he's going to continue to be a threat, and he's going to continue to be a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy even in 2026. So my wide receiver 5 and rounding out tier number 2 is CeeDee Lamb. Last year, he only finished with 75 receptions and just over 1,000 yards receiving, only 3 touchdowns. And that's due to obviously an injury-filled 2025 season. He had 11 healthy games, and he did produce 16.5 PPR points per game with a 28% target share. And Dallas actually finished second in passing offense. But the problem with CeeDee Lamb and having him here at 5 is that George Pickens is no longer merely just a secondary receiver. Pickens led Dallas in catches, yards, and touchdowns last season, meaning Lamb may not regain the overwhelming target share that he previously enjoyed. And I don't foresee him doing that. I think that it's going to be more of a committee going forward, and it makes it really hard to rank them. But if I have to pick one, I think that CeeDee Lamb is a more dominant receiver, and I think he's more explosive. I think that he's the one that you go with here, and that's why I've got him here at number 5. Tier 3. So this tier is filled with legitimate wide receiver ones, but every player has one defining question. Is it quarterback play, injury history, target competition, a new offense, a new coordinator, or is it just availability? My first one on this list is Justin Jefferson. In my opinion, he is the best wide receiver in football. He is overall, every single down, that's the guy that you want. Out there on the field, you want him one-on-one, man on man. That's the guy that you want is Justin Jefferson. But the problem is they do not have a guaranteed long-term answer at quarterback. And we don't even know who their 2026 starter is going to be. I imagine that it's probably going to be Kyler Murray, and I'd be more than thrilled that if it is Kyler Murray. I think that if it is Kyler Murray, then Justin Jefferson might sneak into tier 2 here easily. He easily could, but with J.J. McCarthy, J.J. McCarthy is a disaster, and I do not think he needs to be the starter there. Justin Jefferson still commands an elite target share, but if they can even provide him with competent play, even if it's Kyler, even JJ, if they can provide him with competent quarterback play, he has an obvious path to 1,400 yards and double digit a week PPR production. So at wide receiver 7, I've got Drake London. And this is when you really see a big difference in how I've got my rankings versus the ADP. And if you saw my last video of talking about the running backs, you'll see that I had a massive gap in running backs and why I had them rated so highly, and the running backs here were so low, and then it's flipped here, and I explained that I'm very high on wide receivers this year as compared to running backs. I think running backs are overvalued, and you'll see that going forward for the rest of the video. So Drake London, he only played 12 games because of a knee injury, but he still caught 68 passes for 900 yards and 7 touchdowns on 112 targets. Now, I think that he's going to go over 140 targets this year. The only competition he has with targets is Bijan. I don't think Kyle Pitts is. I think he's a little overvalued this year. I don't think he's going to get the targets. I think his only competition is Bijan. Another issue with Drake London is obviously the quarterback. I think it's going to be Tua. I think Tua is going to be the quarterback. And we've seen with Tyreek Hill, with Jalen Waddle, that he can produce a wide receiver 1 candidate. He can do that. So I think it's possible that Drake London can finish as a wide receiver 1 candidate. I totally believe that. But I think that his target ceiling is elite. But the question is whether Atlanta can turn all of the opportunities into enough passing production with the quarterback. At wide receiver 8, I've got A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown last year produced 1,000 yards off of 78 receptions and 7 touchdowns on 121 targets. He finished as a wide receiver 1 fantasy points per game for the past 4 years, has ranked among the league leaders in target share throughout his career. But the problem with A.J. Brown is obviously he's going to a new team this year, and he's going to a new quarterback after spending 4 years with Jalen Hurts and Jalen Hurts styled offense and the things that he does and how he operates, now going to Drake May. And I think that Romeo Doubs being there is going to eat into a little bit of that. Nothing major. I don't think that. But I think that in New England, in the red zone, this is A.J. Brown. This is where A.J. Brown is going to feast. He's going to feast in the red zone, and he's going to be their third down target. So even during a frustrating final year in Philadelphia, he was still able to exceed over 1,000 yards, and he still remained dominant against man coverage. The Patriots threw him enough to support him, but now we have to price in a new quarterback, a new system, and the first signs of declining efficiency. At wide receiver 9, I've got Nico Collins. Nico Collins has never played more than 15 games in a season, and he's missed more than 19 games across 5 seasons. I don't think the offense has been as consistent than many people expected with C.J. Stroud. I know I fell into that crowd initially, but I think that he is an elite per route producer whose only major concerns are health and the offensive consistency. I think he's been quietly one of fantasy's best per game receivers for the past 3 straight seasons. He wins downfield, he earns targets, and produces elite efficiency whenever he actually is active. The reason he isn't higher is simple. He has never played a complete season, and Houston's offense has not consistently reached the ceiling like many people have expected the past few years. At wide receiver 10, I've got George Pickens, GP. He broke out this past year with the Dallas Cowboys. obviously having career highs in receptions, yards, and touchdowns, as well as targets. He ended up finishing as a wide receiver 4 in total fantasy scoring. And even when CeeDee Lamb was active, he still commanded a 20% target share and had 2.24 yards per route run. And he's currently been sitting out, but he's currently seeking a long-term contract extension, but he is expected to be back for training camp. So that's not really an issue that we need to worry about. So obviously last year when CeeDee Lamb went down, GP took advantage of that without a beat. And with saying that, I think that going into this year, if both of them are healthy, I think that both of them are capped at a ceiling, and it just depends on which week and how the matchups are for who is going to dominate that week. I don't think he was just productive when CeeDee missed time, because his numbers remained strong even when he was with CeeDee and without CeeDee. Dallas finally unlocked his downfield talent, and Dak Prescott gave him the best quarterback play he's had of his entire career. The concern is no longer whether Pickens can break out, it's whether you're paying for last season's ceiling or not. At number 11, I've got Rashee Rice. So as a rookie, Rashee Rice produced 79 receptions off 102 targets and 7 touchdowns. And he's only played 12 games over the following 2 seasons because of injuries and suspension. Everybody obviously sees him as Kansas City's number 1 wide receiver, but the problem is the off the field issues and how that's going to look going forward and into the season, and what suspensions are going to be upheld this season versus next season, and it's just kind of a mess. But the thing is with Rashee is he has potential elite volume near the line of scrimmage, but he's got the most or more than most uncertainty than almost every other wide receiver in the top 15. He's already shown that he can function as Kansas City's high volume wide receiver 1, especially on underneath routes and after the catch. The talent and role create the top 10 upside, but he's barely been available over the last 2 seasons, and Mahomes is returning from a major knee injury. The ranking is a bet on availability as much as ability. At wide receiver 12 and rounding out tier number 3, I've got Chris Olave. Chris Olave has reestablished himself as an elite PPR receiver by catching 100 passes for 1,100, almost 1,200 yards and 9 touchdowns off of 156 targets. He finished as the wide receiver 6 and became especially productive after Tyler Shuck took over at the quarterback, commanding 29% target share and averaging 18.8 PPR points with Tyler Shuck at the helm. Okay, that is massive. The main risk with Olave is obviously the concussions and just injury history, and they added Jordan Tyson. Also, he's going to be seeking a new contract coming up soon, but there's been no indication that his role will decrease in any way. I mean, so essentially he's a high volume wide receiver 1 whose quarterback situation finally is beginning to work in his favor. You know, he's turned elite usage into elite production, and once Tyler Shuck took over, he became one of the highest scoring fantasy football receivers in fantasy football. And the Saints' decision to move him around the formations made him harder to defend. And the biggest concern still just remains his health. But the role and the target volume are exactly what we want as fantasy managers. So tier 4, this is where the draft can be won. These receivers all have strong wide receiver 1 paths, but the market is asking us to project a breakout, a healthy rebound, or a major change in the role that they have within their offense. And the first person that we're going to talk about is Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers posted career highs in receptions, yards, and touchdowns, and with 118 targets. He remains 8th in target share across the league and 7th in yards per route run. And even when Lamar missed 4 games, he was still producing. The problem is that obviously Baltimore primarily remains a run first offense. And due to that, Flowers has only scored 14 touchdowns in the last 3 seasons. He can still produce strong yardage without consistently receiving the high value red zone targets that are needed to become an elite wide receiver one. What keeps him in tier 4 is his touchdown upside. Baltimore can score through Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, and its tight ends without forcing red zone targets to Flowers. Wide receiver 14, Teteroa McMillan. Teteroa McMillan last year came onto the scene and immediately produced, ended up winning Offensive Rookie of the Year. He caught 70 receptions for 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns. He's 6'5", 212. Apparently this year he's playing at like 230, 240 is what I'm hearing. And he's coming back. He's the clear alpha there in Carolina. And there's going to be very big things with him. The main concerns with him is obviously the lack of passing volume. Bryce Young just doesn't air out the ball enough to really have that true wide receiver one in fantasy. But he's already delivered an 1,000-yard rookie season while functioning as our clear number one wide receiver. Year 2 breakouts usually happen when talent, volume, and role all align, which they do for him. The only real question is whether the Panthers' passing offense can be productive enough to support a top 10 fantasy finish for T-Mac. So Garrett Wilson opened up the 2025 season as a top 10 fantasy wide receiver, commanding 31.2% target share and 45.9% of first read share before a knee injury ended his season. He finished the season with only 36 receptions for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. Now, obviously, the Jets expect him to be fully healthy entering the 2026 season, and he still remains their top receiving option. I think his biggest risks coming in are obviously the quarterback, just environment around him in general. He's earned elite volume, but he has yet to receive consistently high-level quarterback play. So before the knee injury, Wilson was producing like a fantasy wide receiver one and dominating New York's first reads. He should return as the unquestioned top target, but the same concerns remain though. Fantasy managers have been waiting years for the Jets to pair his elite talent and volume with competent quarterback production. So coming in at wide receiver 16, we've got Devontae Smith. Devontae Smith last year produced 77 receptions for 1,000 yards and 4 touchdowns on 113 targets. And that was all behind A.J. Brown. And now A.J. Brown is gone. So the wide receiver role is for the taking for Devontae Smith. I don't know if I truly believe that he is just the alpha that is going to dominate as a wide receiver one. And that's why I've got him ranked down here. I just don't know if he's got the skill set to truly do that. He's a great wide receiver and a great number 2. But I don't know if he can truly be the alpha coming in. But he doesn't really have any competition. They brought in Mekhi Lemon, but I don't think Mekhi Lemon's really going to compete against him for target share. And Smith's already produced multiple 1,000-yard seasons behind A.J. Brown. Now that he's gone, it gives the best opportunity that Smitty's had his entire career. So does Philadelphia just stay too run-heavy? Or do they increase Smitty's floor and the ceiling up significantly for Smitty? T. Higgins last year produced a career best fantasy finish with only 59 receptions, 846 yards, and 11 touchdowns in only 15 games. He even reached that total despite Joe missing 4 games in the season. And coming into this season, there's just a vibe around Cincinnati that I'm getting that everything's good. I don't hear drama. I don't hear off-season talk. I think everything's kind of coming together. And so if their defense is anything like it's been here recently, they're going to be passing the ball a lot because they're going to be behind. They got to air the ball out. And so that's going to benefit both Jamar, obviously, but also T at the same time. And T seems to be the red zone and the touchdown machine for Cincinnati. I think that T. Higgins is the best number 2 wide receiver in the NFL. I think it gives him. I think that the Cleveland offense gives him clear double-digit touchdown opportunities this year. The only problem is the injury history, and obviously Jamar Chase's targets. It just makes it difficult to truly project how much he's going to score. Lab McConkey coming in at wide receiver 18. In his rookie campaign, he went for 82 catches for almost 1,200 yards to then follow it up in a sophomore campaign with only 66 receptions for 800 yards, 6 touchdowns. Now he enters 2026 fully healthy with Herbert healthier. The offensive line is expected to improve and be healthier. So everything around him should be better. And obviously they brought in Mike McDaniel, and that'll really benefit him in a great way. Mike McDaniels was there for Jalen Waddle's big years as well as Tyreek's big years in Miami. So I'm expecting big things out of Lad McConkey coming in here. And he already looked like a future star as a rookie. But now he enters the season fully healthy with improved protection for Herbert and a refreshed offensive system with Mike McDaniel. You're betting that the rookie season was the real player and that last year was the outlier. And now rounding out tier number 4 is Emeka Egbuka. Emeka Egbuka started off the year extremely hot. I mean, as the favorite for Offensive Player of the Year, was doing extremely well, and then suffered a hamstring injury, and tried to play through it the rest of the year and did, and still produced as a true wide receiver, but wasn't able to really harness everything, and I think that the injury really held him back from that. I think that with Tampa Bay losing Mike Evans, he is now the guy that they want to step into that wide receiver 1 role. So I'm expecting big things from him, but I just haven't seen enough on a down-to-down basis or game-to-game basis that I can really sit there and say that, yes, he is going to be the true alpha, the number 1 guy. I think the question is, can he sustain the early season efficiency that he had in 2025 across 17 games? Okay, so the last tier we're going to break down is tier number 5. This tier has players that carry the widest range of outcomes. Some are aging veterans, some are returning from significant injuries, while others just need expanded roles within their offense. But each one of them still has a realistic path to outperforming where they're getting drafted right now. So coming in at wide receiver 20 is Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle was traded to Denver from Miami. Last year he had 64 receptions for 900 yards and 6 touchdowns on 100 targets. I think that the only people that he's really competing with in this Denver offense is Courtland Sutton, who is a true just wide receiver 1, just your outside kind of alpha guy. And Jalen Waddle is going to be your inside guy. I think that they were kind of looking for that for the past few years with Troy Franklin, but I think that now they've found their guy in Jalen Waddle. I think that for him, the risk for him is just that there is some more depth there, like I said, with Troy Franklin and Pat Bryant. But I think that he has a stronger quarterback situation. team environment and just may potentially have a more distributed volume. But I will say, when Denver went and got him, they paid a premium to go get him. And his speed, route running, give Bo Nix a true field stretching weapon, and the overall offensive environment should improve just with Jalen being there. The concern is that obviously Denver already has the established targets, like we said, and it would be hard for Waddle, but he could become the first option merely than just a one piece in a balanced offense. Coming in at wide receiver 21 is Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin only played in 10 games last year. He only finished with 38 receptions for 600 yards and 3 touchdowns. Despite missing all that time, he was still Washington's leader and ranked near the top 10 in first downs generated per route. He enters 2026 with very little target competition. Deebo Samuel looks like he's not going to be there. He's currently still a free agent at the time of this video, so I don't really know what he's going to end up doing or if Brandon Ayuk is even going to sign with the Commanders. So even with McLaurin's 2025 season that was derailed by injuries, he was still effective on the field, and he remains Washington's clear number 1 wide receiver. There's very little target competition behind him. At 31, though, we have to ask whether this is simply just a bounce back opportunity or is it the beginning of a decline. So wide receiver 22, I've got Mike Evans. Mike Evans was traded from Tampa Bay to San Francisco this offseason. Mike Evans actually ended his streak of 11 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. He ended this last year with only having 30 receptions for 368 yards and 3 touchdowns. San Francisco signed him to become a major outside and red zone threat for Brock Purdy. Evans currently owns 866 career receptions, 13,000 yards, and 108 touchdowns, with his touchdown total ranking right among the top 10 in NFL history. Now, Evans will be 33 before the season, and he's coming off of significant injuries and is entering a new offense for the first time ever in his career. San Fran also added Christian Kirk and their first-round receiver, Deshaun Stribling. San Francisco gives Mike Evans an accurate quarterback and a creative play caller in Kyle Shanahan, and he remains one of football's greatest red zone receivers. The concern is obvious. It's health, age, and an unfamiliar offense, which creates one of the widest ranges of outcomes. Number 23, I've got Luther Burden. Luther Burden last year only caught 47 passes for 652 yards and 2 touchdowns while only playing 400 offensive snaps. His 2.69 yards per route run actually led all rookies and ranked behind only Puka Nacua and JSN in terms of NFL receivers overall. Chicago traded away DJ Moore, and so that's opening up a much larger role in the offense, and I believe that Luther Burden's going to be the one that's going to fill that role. And plus, you can't forget the fact that Ben Johnson has publicly came out and praised Luther Burden in saying that he would buy Luther Burden stock. Luther Burden's rookie totals just look modest because he didn't play enough snaps, but his per route efficiency was elite. DJ Moore's gone. Ben Johnson has already talked about expanding his role within the offense. If his route volume doubles without the efficiency depreciating, he can become one of the biggest breakouts in fantasy football. I could see him easily becoming the next Amon-Ra St. Brown. At number 24, I've got Malik Neighbors. Malik Neighbors is a wonderful wide receiver. The only issue is obviously his knee. There has not been really any positive things coming out of his camp. I would have him ranked a lot higher, probably in tier 1 or 2, if it weren't for all of the negative things that I've seen and heard this offseason. Apparently, it wasn't just a simple ACL recovery. It was a meniscus, and there was a second surgery because of his availability, explosiveness, and just the workload in general, which is kind of crazy that that was even a thing. The ranking of Malik here is entirely about the ACL, meniscus damage, second surgery, and possibility that he either misses early games, they put him on the PUP, or it just takes time to regain his explosiveness. Now, if he comes back in the second half of the year, yes, I fully expect him to be a real true wide receiver 1, but you don't want to sacrifice here, so that's why I've got him here at 24. So rounding out this video at number 25 is going to be the legend Davante Adams. Davante Adams last year caught 60 passes for 800 yards and also led the NFL with 14 receiving touchdowns in 14 games, averaging obviously a touchdown per game. Now, I think it's going to be hard for him to follow that touchdown per game up, but he still remains under contract, and I think he's still a wonderful red zone threat for them. And with Puka there, Puka obviously draws the attention. But the thing with Adams is obviously him being 33. He missed actually the final 3 games of the regular season when seeding kind of became an issue for them because of a hamstring injury. And obviously Puka just remains the clear wide receiver 1. The volume shares are going to Puka. So that's why I've got him down here. But I'll say that even at the age of 32 last year, he was still one of the best touchdown scorers in all of football. I mean, he led the league with 14 receiving touchdowns. The concern is only that he finished below 800 yards and he missed time with a hamstring injury. And he's obviously clearly behind Puka in terms of the volume that he's getting in the offense. He can still win you weeks, but his production is increasingly dependent on touchdowns this year, and I just don't know if he's going to be able to repeat that. So looking at the entire rankings that I have for the top 25, which wide receivers do I have too high? Which wide receivers do I have too low? Make sure you drop both names down in the comments below, and make sure you go to the description and make sure you click the link. It'll take you to a 2026 championship roster framework for free that you can use with this ranking list for your next draft.